Hey, Chef Ro here. Today I'm going to teach you how to make shrimp stock. Now I have another video where I show you how to make other types of stock, primarily poultry stocks or beef stocks, but shrimp stock is its own kind of little animal. You make it just a little bit differently. Some people would even call it a fumet. This is also how you would make fish stock with fish bones. You can find seafood stocks in the grocery stores these days, but sometimes it's a little harder to find. So if you're trying to make something like a shrimp bisque or a shrimp risotto, or you want to use your own homemade shrimp stock in something like a gumbo, it's very simple to do, and I'm going to show you how to do it. First things first, we're going to get the pan nice and hot. And then we're going to add just a little bit of fat. I usually try and use a neutral oil like avocado oil or something. You want a semi-high heat temperature, but not really a flavorful oil. Okay? Then we're going to add our shrimp shells. Now you could also use lobster shells if you were trying to make lobster bisque or something like that. Crab shells would work too. You can see I have my little Ziploc-y bag here. Basically, anytime I cook shrimp, I save the shells, freeze them, and then when I need shrimp stock, here they are. Okay? Now I'm going to just saute these shells until they start to turn pink. Just like you would actual shrimp, right? And the funny thing is this will actually taste shrimpier than cooking just shrimp by itself, because half of the flavor is right here in the actual shells, okay? Now you see I have a rounded bottom pan. It's not the ideal shape. You usually want a straight-sided pan. Unfortunately, my straight-sided stock pot is over here on the other burner making chicken stock, so it's my stock day here today. So unfortunately we use what we have sometimes, okay? Now I'm going to put in my mirepoix, which roughly is 2 parts onion, 1 part celery, 1 part carrot. You don't have to be real precise on your cuts on this. It's usually an exercise more in speed than accuracy. And you can see I have onion skins and the butt ends of onions. Much like my shrimp shells, I just take all those bits and pieces, carrot peels, things like that, that I use and that a lot of people throw away. I put them in a Ziploc bag until I'm ready to make stock in the freezer, and then I have it ready to go. So we're going to let this cook for a second, and then I'll show you what we do next. You can see that my vegetables and everything have reduced quite a bit because a lot of the water has come out of it. You can see I've got some brown on the bottom. Don't worry about that. That's actually good. That's flavor, right? And you can see that the shells are actually starting to kind of turn a bit white here. This is exactly what we're looking for. Okay, so once these onions and carrots and celery have softened a bit and given off some of their water, once the shells have started to turn a bit white, now we're going to take this and add some tomato sauce. Now there's not a real precise measurement here. You're going to add a chunk. I don't know, a chunk like that. Okay. Now we're going to let this cook until it darkens up a bit, because we need to cook the acid of this off. This is actually a very quick cooking stock, so we don't have hours and hours and hours to let that tomato sauce mellow out. We've got, 30 minutes is all that this is going to simmer, maybe an hour. So we need to cook off some of that acid right now. So we're going to let that get a little bit darker, and then I'll show you how to move on. You can see here that my tomato paste has kind of gone almost a little bit orange. It's getting much darker on the bottom too, so we need to keep an eye on that also. The tomato paste itself has gone a little bit on the orangey side, so that means we are ready to go. Now, because there's no impurities in the bones, because there's no bones, we don't have to worry as much about the stock becoming cloudy, okay? So we're going to take our water, and we're going to deglaze with that, and you want to use cold water here, okay? Even though there's not really impurities in the shells themselves, cold water is still going to give you a superior stock. We always want to start with cold, okay? Now I'm going to keep adding it. You can see this stuff is loosening up nicely, and that's where a lot of our flavor is. And a little char isn't a bad thing here. Okay? Here we go. And if you don't get it all up, don't worry too much about it. A lot of it will come loose during the cooking process, in that simmering, but we want to try and get it all scraped up nicely if we can. Okay? Alright. And then you're just going to keep adding the water. Now, ideally, you only want basically just enough water to barely cover it. You can see here, right, that I have just enough water to cover it, okay? And you could even add just a touch more to account for some evaporation, but you don't want too much or else you're going to have a flavorless thin stock, okay? Now, I'm going to throw just a couple of garlic cloves in here that I've cut in half. No big deal, right? Just throw them right in. I've got some parsley stems and a sprig of thyme here. Okay. Throw a bay leaf in there. And you can see I've got some crushed peppercorns. Okay. I crushed them with the side of this actually. Okay. And we're going to throw all of that in there. I'm going to try and get some of this off here. I'm just going to add a touch more water. We're going to bring it up to a boil, down to a simmer, and we're going to let it simmer for about 45 minutes. And then I will show you how we finish. My stock has now simmered for about 45 minutes. After you hit about the 45-minute mark, the longer you cook it, the only reason it would taste better is because the water will evaporate out and it'll concentrate the flavor. But if you added the correct amount of water to begin with, you won't even have that problem. Now, you can just strain this a million times through a fine mesh strainer. I use a chinois, and if I don't use cheesecloth, I end up usually straining mine about 10 times just to be safe. But most people aren't that fanatical about it either. I do use cheesecloth on my shrimp stock because there's all these little particulates and I don't want to chance anyone getting a piece of shell through there. So if that's the case, you don't even need a super fine mesh strainer because the cheesecloth will do the work for you. So you just need to put a strainer over a bowl lined with cheesecloth. Let me show you what I have set up. Here I have a hot pad, okay, because I have a metal bowl and my counters aren't heat safe. So, hot pad, because hot stock is going to go into a metal bowl, okay. Now I have a strainer. Mine's called a chinois. It's a very fine mesh strainer. And then I have some rinsed cheesecloth here inside of it. You always need to make sure to rinse cheesecloth before you use it, or else you could get little stringies in there, and string is not our friend when it comes to food. Okay, so let me show you what my stock looks like. You can see here my stock has gotten a little darker. It's reduced a little bit. You can see kind of the line where it was, and it's gone down a little bit. Everything looks kind of wilted. That is what you're looking for. When it looks like this, it's done. Time to strain. Very simple. Let me show you. All you're going to do is take this pot and pour it through that cheesecloth. If it folds up on you a little bit, no big deal. All you got to do is pull it back out. It can come in handy to have a second person to hold the cheesecloth up for you, but if you don't, and even if it falls down a little bit, not the end of the world here, okay? So we're going to just strain all of that through. All right. And then when that is done straining, you're going to either use it immediately or rapidly chill it. You don't want this just sitting out on the counter forever because that would be very unsafe food-wise, and we're not trying to kill people around here. But you can see here, now that I've got this nice and strained, that I have a beautiful shrimp stock. Hopefully you see how easy shrimp stock is to make. And because you use up all the stuff that you would normally kind of throw away anyway, it's a super sustainable way of using up those ends and bits and getting more bang for your buck out of your cooking. And if you use this seafood stock to put into any seafood dish, it'll give it just that extra little punch of flavor that you might be looking for. I hope you enjoyed learning how to make seafood stock, shrimp stock, and I hope you make it again soon.